Dr. Berg recently made a video talking about how Indian men have these big protruded bellies. And his question was, why do they have these big protruded bellies? And I want to dive into that on this video. There's something called kwashiorkor, which is spelled Kwashiorkor. And what it is, I learned about this when I was in doctorate school, is a protein deficiency. And it's really interesting how this protein deficiency will cause the extremities to shrink, but it causes the belly tissues to swell. If you look that up in Google, you'll typically see little children that have these really skinny arms and these big protruded bellies. This happens more in third world countries. And one of the points that he was making is that a lot of these people in these third world countries are probably eating more processed foods. They're not getting the vitamins and minerals they need from high quality foods like we have access here to in America. And they're not getting enough protein because they eat mainly a vegetarian diet. And he provides some ways to address that. And I have a little bit of a different method that I use for, are these foods bad for you? And I'm going to go over that at the end of the video, how you can do some at-home testing with just a pulse oximeter to see if you have any food intolerances or possible food allergies. And it's a really simple test. But I want to go over everything that Dr. Berg talked about. He gave some really good examples about how in chimpanzees, they're omnivores, which means that they eat meat and vegetables, and they tend to have flatter stomachs. But gorillas, and when we talk about goats and sheep and cows, they tend to have these bigger bloated stomachs because they eat mainly a vegetarian diet. This is something that I think is very important if you are a vegetarian or a vegan. You need to make sure that you are getting proper amounts of protein because it can be harder to digest versus the proteins that you can get from meat sources. And there is a whole lot of information out there. I know some people who do really well with a vegetarian and a vegan style diet, but they take the proper precautions when it comes to making sure that they're getting all their vitamins and minerals and they're getting enough protein. This video is, I want to talk about the benefits of eating meat and how, in my belief, is that you should go towards a Mediterranean style diet in order to have the best balance of both, but also you should be intuitive with your body. And if you eat certain food substances and you notice that you have gas, bloating, maybe you get alternating bouts of constipation and diarrhea, that you really need to look at your gut health a little bit differently, because something that you think may be good for you could actually be causing an inflammatory response. And I know that that can be frustrating, especially when I'm working with patients, is that they think that they're eating a very healthy diet, but they're getting more bloated. Maybe they become more constipated. They're having more diarrhea. They're having more brain fog, more fatigue. And the test that I'm going to show you at the end of the video will help you debunk that. And we have to treat everybody as an individual. It's not just that there's a one size fits all. So when we talk about these Indian men and why they have this bloating, they probably have less access to protein sources because of their religion. They're not eating beef. They're probably not eating as much chicken as we are here in America, which can lead to, like we talked about earlier, these protein deficiencies eventually. One of the ways that I help these types of patients that I suspect they may have some protein deficiency is I really like amino acids, because they're broken down protein. You can supplement them really easily and they're easier on your digestive tract. When we get worried about this bloating is if they have something called leaky gut or if they have something called SIBO. Leaky gut, if you've watched some of my past videos, talks about how the intestinal barrier gets broken down, and this can lead to viruses, bacteria, proteins, parasites being able to get into your bloodstream and go anywhere in your body. These look like autoimmune conditions if we're talking about standard medical terms. And how do you fix that? You got to fix the gut. But glutamine is an amino acid that is very rich in the gut. And if you undergo large amounts of stress, then what will happen is that it breaks down that glutamine barrier, which leads to leaky gut, SIBO, and a lot of these other chronic conditions that we see. Now, this isn't something that your gastroenterologist is going to be able to detect. A lot of the times these patients are getting scoped, they're getting certain tests done, but maybe they're not getting a full stool panel, they're not getting checked for H. pylori, they're not getting the right testing done for food intolerances or food allergies, and they keep having these digestive issues. And basically, the only thing that you're going to get from a gastroenterologist anyways is either a surgery or a pill. So if you want to go that route, you definitely can. But not to digress too much, if they have a protein malnutrition or deficiency over enough long period of time, there's no way that as that stomach lining gets broken down that they can repair it. This makes them more susceptible to something called SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So when that stomach lining gets broken down and then the immune system becomes overburdened because it's having to, essentially clean up all of the viruses, bacteria, proteins, and parasites, what will happen is that bacteria will overproliferate and you'll get more gas, more bloating, and that will push the stomach out. So you have to, one, seal up the gut. Two, you have to kill off that bad bacteria, and you have to stop feeding it. And one point that he made that I think is really important is something that's called intuitive dieting, where if you eat something and then you get bloated afterwards, then you want to try to avoid that food. And it doesn't mean that you have to avoid it forever, but this is where you should slow down with your meals. You should take time. You should document. This is why a food journal, especially if you have chronic health issues, this can really help you and your practitioner determine what is going on and the best way to address it. Especially, you're probably going to work with more of an alternative provider when it comes to these types of issues, probably not your primary care. And one of the scary things about this is that as they get this protein malnutrition, what will happen is that they tend to accumulate more fat around the gut as well, because they are eating a diet that is rich in these, high fructose corn syrup, processed foods, these trans fats that are found in a lot of these cookies, cakes, candies, brownies, chips, and those types of, conventional foods that we have now. But along with that fatty belly comes fatty liver. I see this a lot more than I would have thought in my diabetics. Typically, if you get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and you don't control it very well, it's very likely that at some point down the road, you're going to end up developing fatty liver, which is another huge issue, especially if you drink alcohol, and that just turns into a huge mess. So, a few things that you can do are, one, you can add meat into your diet, more of an omnivore diet. Dr. Berg suggests a carnivore diet. I have 3 diets that I really like. I really like carnivore if you have any autoimmune issues, gut issues that are really severe and you've tried everything under the sun but nothing is working. The second one that I really like is the keto diet. I don't suggest that long term. I do that mainly for my headache patients, epileptic patients, and people who struggle losing weight. Anywhere between 3 to 6 months is usually long enough, depending on the severity of their condition that they're dealing with. So I had a patient who had multiple car accidents, headaches for 3 years, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. And we did a keto diet, and it only took us about 2 to 4 months until we got her brain to where the inflammation was down enough that she didn't have headaches anymore. So there are specific diets for specific conditions. And then once we have you established into a stable position where you're not having chronic inflammation, headaches, you're not having digestive issues, typically the Mediterranean diet is what I suggest to switch into from a longevity standpoint. So another thing that you can do is essential amino acids. I really make sure that they're essential and not just your regular BCAAs. So you want to make sure that you're getting all 9, 11, everybody can debate that, but just do 11 because then you know that you're not going to have a deficiency. That will help repair the stomach lining. It'll make sure you get enough glutamine, and it'll make sure that you don't develop these protein deficiencies. I really like those, especially since I work out and it's hard for me to eat throughout the day while seeing patients. So that allows me to make sure that I get all of my protein in without having to worry about getting gassy and bloating and having digestive issues. The other thing that he suggests is betaine HCl. That's typically if you're having a lot of heartburn, especially when it comes to H. pylori, which you can get checked for, but that is something that is very severe when you talk about heartburn. And then the last thing that I promise is I do something that's called the COCO test with my patients, and you take a pulse oximeter and you just place it on your finger. And what you do is you want to be in a quiet environment where nothing's going to startle you, and you let your heart rate get settled. What you do is then you would let's take for a peanut, for example, because that's a highly allergenic food, is that you would put that in your mouth and you would chew it a few times and let it sit there. And you see if your pulse goes up or down 5 beats. If it does, that can mean that you have a potential food allergen. So what you would do is you would do that for peanuts, you could do it for different nuts, you could do it for certain food groups like citrus, you could do it for nightshades, you can do it for artificial sweeteners, and just see how your body reacts to it and see if it has a sympathetic response. If it does, then you know that you potentially have a food allergy or food intolerance. You want to avoid that probably from anywhere between 60 to 90 days, and then you can try it again. But you have to be proactive with your gut and healing that as well. So thank you all for watching. Check out some of my other gut health videos. And thank you, Dr. Berg, for posting that. I thought that was really interesting. And I just wanted to put my take on here. If anybody has any questions, comments, please put those below. I'm not always correct, but I try to, put food for thought out there. And hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.